October 19th, 1965. Darkness falls across the Central Highlands of South Vietnam. 25 miles south of Pleiku, less than 20 miles from the Cambodian border, a triangular fortress sits surrounded by triple canopy jungle. This is Camp Plei Me, one of dozens of Special Forces outposts scattered across the highlands. Inside its defensive wire are 300 Montagnard irregulars, 14 South Vietnamese Special Forces, and 10 American Green Berets. They have no idea that creeping through the jungle toward them at this very moment are 4,000 North Vietnamese army soldiers from 2 full regiments. They have no idea that tonight begins the first major battle between American ground forces and the North Vietnamese army. And they have absolutely no idea that the enemy plan is brilliantly simple and brutally effective. One regiment will besiege the camp, the other will ambush the relief force, then both will combine to overrun the fortress and kill everyone inside. What happens over the next 6 days will push these defenders to the absolute brink of annihilation and set the stage for the bloodiest battle of the early Vietnam War just weeks later at a place called Ia Drang. Camp Plei Me exists for a specific purpose: to win the loyalty of the Montagnard tribespeople and gather intelligence on North Vietnamese infiltration along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The Montagnards are highland tribes ethnically distinct from lowland Vietnamese. The communists call them savages, the French call them Montagnards, mountain people. The Americans call them some of the best fighters in Vietnam. The camp itself is a triangular fortress with 350 meters of defensive wire on each side. Bunkers protect the perimeter. A dirt airstrip runs along the southwest side outside the wire. Mortar pits anchor the interior, and the families of many Montagnard defenders live in huts just outside the defensive perimeter, a vulnerability that will prove devastating when the attack begins. The American detachment is Detachment A255 5th Special Forces Group. 12 Green Berets trained to advise indigenous forces and call in devastating air support. But on the night of October 19th, only 10 Americans are inside the camp. The others are on patrol or manning listening posts in the jungle. These 10 Americans and their Montagnard and South Vietnamese allies have no idea they are about to face overwhelming odds against a meticulously planned enemy offensive designed to crush them and capture Pleiku City itself. North Vietnamese Major General Chu Huy Man commands the offensive. He has under his control the 32nd Regiment and the 33rd Regiment, roughly 4,200 highly trained North Vietnamese Army regulars who have infiltrated south through the Chu Pong Massif along the Cambodian border. The original plan called for a 3rd Regiment, the 66th, to arrive by early November, and the full offensive to launch in December 1965. But Minh moves the timeline up dramatically. He knows the newly formed 1st Cavalry Division has just arrived at An Khe in September. He knows they are equipped with revolutionary new airmobile tactics, hundreds of helicopters that can move troops and firepower faster than anything seen before in warfare. And he knows that if he waits until December, the 1st Cav will be fully operational and his advantage will evaporate. So he attacks now with just 2 regiments. The plan is devastatingly simple in 3 phases. First, the 33rd Regiment surrounds Plei Me and exerts enough pressure to force the South Vietnamese to send a relief column from Pleiku. Second, the 32nd Regiment ambushes and destroys that relief column on the road. Third, with the relief force annihilated, both regiments combine strength to overrun Plei Me and massacre everyone inside. It is a classic trap, and the Americans are about to walk straight into it. 7 p.m, October 19th. A Montagnard patrol moving near the camp perimeter suddenly takes fire. The patrol scrambles back toward the wire under heavy automatic weapons fire. This is the signal. The trap is sprung. By 10 p.m, a North Vietnamese company overruns an outpost southwest of the camp. The defenders inside Plei Me hear the gunfire and see muzzle flashes in the darkness. They know what is coming. Just after midnight, the full assault begins. Mortars rain down on the camp. 81mm rounds arc through the night sky and detonate inside the defensive perimeter with devastating effect. 57mm recoilless rifle rounds smash into bunkers. Heavy machine gun fire rakes the wire from multiple directions. The North Vietnamese attack from the north, east and west simultaneously. This is not a probing attack. This is a coordinated regimental assault designed to breach the perimeter and get inside where superior numbers will overwhelm the defenders in close combat. The Green Berets and their Montagnard fighters rush to defensive positions. The Americans coordinate the defense, directing fire and calling for illumination rounds. Flares pop overhead, casting the battlefield in flickering white light that creates dancing shadows across the wire. In that harsh illumination, the defenders can see North Vietnamese sappers crawling toward the wire with satchel charges. Infantry follows in waves behind them. The volume of fire coming at the camp is immense. Tracer rounds crisscross the darkness. Mortar rounds detonate inside the compound, throwing up geysers of dirt and shrapnel. Some attackers actually breach the outer wire. They get inside the first defensive line. Hand grenades detonate. Men scream. The fighting becomes desperate at point-blank range, but the defenders hold. The Green Berets have positioned their Montagnards well. Overlapping fields of fire create kill zones. When sappers breach the wire, they run into concentrated automatic weapons fire that cuts them down. When infantry masses for assault, mortars from inside the camp smash into the formations. The North Vietnamese are brave and aggressive, but courage cannot overcome well-sighted defensive positions and determined defenders who know surrender means death. By dawn, the ground outside the wire is littered with North Vietnamese bodies. The first assault has failed. But everyone inside Plei Me knows this is just the beginning. The enemy has shown they have the strength and will to press this attack, and the camp is now completely surrounded. Morning brings a grim assessment. The camp has casualties, dead and wounded. Ammunition expenditure has been heavy. The Montagnard families living outside the wire are now trapped between the camp and the North Vietnamese forces. Many flee into the jungle, others huddle near the perimeter hoping the Americans can protect them. The situation is dire but not yet critical. The Americans have radio, contact with headquarters in Pleiku. They report the size and intensity of the attack, and they request immediate relief. The South Vietnamese command makes the decision that General Man has been waiting for. They will send a mechanized relief column from Pleiku to break the siege. The trap is set. The 32nd Regiment is waiting. October 22nd. The relief column departs Pleiku. This is the 3rd Armoured Cavalry Task Force. Roughly 1,200 South Vietnamese troops with American advisors embedded for coordination and fire support. Armoured personnel carriers, tanks, artillery. They roll south down the main highway toward Plei Me 25 miles away. The soldiers in this column know they're heading into a fight. What they do not know is that 2,000 North Vietnamese soldiers from the 32nd Regiment are dug into ambush positions along the route, camouflaged, waiting, heavy weapons sighted to destroy the lead vehicles and block the road, machine guns, positioned to rake the column from both sides, anti-tank weapons ready to engage the armour. The North Vietnamese have done this before. They are experts at the ambush, and this relief column is driving straight into a perfectly prepared killing zone. The ambush hits with devastating fury. Rocket-propelled grenades streak from the jungle and slam into the lead vehicles. Explosions tear through armour. The column grinds to a halt as burning vehicles block the road. Then the machine guns open up. Heavy automatic weapons fire pours from both sides of the highway. Soldiers dive from vehicles seeking any cover. The South Vietnamese troops fight back desperately, but they are trapped on the road with limited cover facing an enemy in prepared positions. The American advisors call for artillery support. Big guns from 1st Cavalry fire bases begin dropping rounds on the ambush positions. The accuracy and volume of American artillery starts to turn the tide. The North Vietnamese had not counted on the 1st Cav's firepower being brought to bear so quickly and so accurately. The ambush bogs down into a sustained firefight. The relief column takes heavy casualties, but the enemy cannot destroy it completely. After hours of fighting, the North Vietnamese break contact and fade back into the jungle. The relief column has survived, but it has been mauled, and it is no longer moving quickly toward Plei Me. Back at the camp, the siege intensifies. The North Vietnamese 33rd Regiment probes the wire constantly. Mortar and recoilless rifle fire pounds the defensive positions day and night. The defenders are running low on ammunition. Medical supplies are dwindling. Casualties mount. Every night brings coordinated attacks testing different sections of the perimeter looking for weak points. The Green Berets know time is working against them. The relief column has been ambushed and is moving slowly. If it does not arrive soon, the camp will be overrun. The only thing keeping Plei Me alive is American air power, and it is about to arrive in overwhelming force. The Air Force begins what will become the most extensive close air support operation in Vietnam to this point. A 1E Sky Raiders roar over the camp, their propellers cutting through the dawn. These are tough old prop-driven attack aircraft packed with bombs, rockets, and cannon ammunition. They make pass after pass, dropping ordnance on North Vietnamese positions identified by the Green Berets on the ground. At night, C-123 Provider transport aircraft orbit overhead, dropping flares that turn night into day. The flares hang suspended under parachutes, swaying in the wind, casting harsh white light across the jungle. In that illumination, the Sky Raiders make attack runs at dangerously low altitude, delivering napalm and fragmentation bombs on enemy concentrations massing for assault. The air campaign escalates rapidly. Over the course of the siege, American aircraft will fly 696 strike sorties. Day and night, they will drop 250,380 pounds of fragmentation bombs, 485,880 pounds of napalm, rockets, cluster bombs. The total ordnance delivered exceeds 736,000 pounds of explosives dropped on an area of just a few square miles around the camp. The North Vietnamese attacking Plei Me face a storm of fire from the sky, unlike anything they have experienced. When they mass for attack, bombs shred the formations. When they take cover in bunkers, napalm burns them alive. When they try to move supplies forward, cluster bombs detonate among the carriers. American air power is literally the only thing preventing the North Vietnamese from overrunning the camp through sheer numbers. But airstrikes cannot do everything. The camp still needs resupply, ammunition, medical supplies, food and water. The airstrip outside the wire is under constant enemy fire and cannot be used for landing aircraft. So the Air Force turns to airdrops. CV-2 Caribou cargo aircraft from the 92nd Aviation Company fly over the camp and push supplies out the rear cargo door. Pallets tumble through the air, trailing parachutes. Some land inside the wire, others drift over the perimeter and land among the North Vietnamese who seize the supplies gratefully. At night, C-123s drop ammunition and medical supplies using different coloured parachutes so defenders can identify the loads. These resupply missions are incredibly dangerous. The aircraft fly low and slow. North Vietnamese anti-aircraft machine guns reach up several thousand feet. Tracers arc toward the lumbering transports. Pilots jink and weave, trying to avoid the fire while maintaining course over the drop zone. Some aircraft take hits. Holes appear in wings and fuselage. But the missions continue because without resupply, Plei Me will die, October 21st, with the relief column. Bogged down and still fighting its way south, the 5th Special Forces Group makes a critical decision. They will insert additional forces directly into Plei Me by helicopter to reinforce the garrison and take command of the defence. The man they choose for this mission is Major Charles A. Beckwith, Sergeant Charlie Beckwith, the founder of what will eventually become Delta Force. In October 1965, Beckwith commands Project Delta, officially Operational Detachment B-52, the most elite Special Forces reconnaissance unit in Vietnam. Beckwith is a hard-charging infantry officer who spent time with the British SS learning their tactics and selection methods. He is exactly the kind of leader the 5th Group needs for a desperate situation. President Lyndon Johnson will personally radio congratulations and encouragement to Beckwith during the siege. That is how important this battle has become politically and strategically. Beckwith assembles a relief force of 175 men, mostly South Vietnamese Rangers, and prepares for an air assault into Plei Me. This is an extremely risky operation. Helicopters flying into a besieged camp under fire, landing in a small area while North Vietnamese machine guns track them, getting the troops off and out before the aircraft are shot down. The pilots who volunteer for this mission know the odds. Many of them will not make it back. On the morning of October 21st, the helicopters lift off from Pleiku and fly south. They approach Plei Me from the northeast, trying to avoid the heaviest concentrations of anti-aircraft fire. As they descend toward the landing zone 5 kilometers northeast of the camp, enemy fire erupts from the jungle below. Tracers reach up toward the helicopters. Pilots hear rounds punching through their aircraft. Door gunners return fire with M60 machine guns, brass casings cascading out into the slipstream. The helicopters flare hard and touch down. Rangers sprint from the doors and form a perimeter. Within minutes, all aircraft are away, some trailing smoke, all carrying bullet holes. Beckwith and his force are on the ground. The Rangers move toward Plei Me through the jungle. This is dangerous territory. North Vietnamese forces are everywhere. The column moves slowly, weapons ready, expecting ambush at any moment. It takes until the next morning, October the 22nd, for Beckwith's force to reach the camp. They move through the defensive wire and Beckwith immediately takes command of Plei Me. The Green Berets, who have been holding the line for 3 days and nights, are exhausted. Ammunition is low, casualties need evacuation. Beckwith surveys the situation and makes an aggressive decision. Rather than just sit inside the wire and wait for the relief column, he will take the fight to the enemy. He will rally outside the camp and attack the besiegers directly. Beckwith takes 2 companies of rangers and moves outside the defensive perimeter. This is incredibly bold. He's taking the fight to an enemy that outnumbers him many times over, in terrain the North Vietnamese know intimately, against soldiers in prepared positions. The rangers move out aggressively, and they walk straight into a buzzsaw. The North Vietnamese have had days to prepare their positions around Plei Me. They know every approach. They have sighted machine guns and mortars to cover every avenue. When Beckwith's force appears, the enemy opens up with devastating fire. The rangers take casualties immediately. 14 men killed in the opening volleys. Wounded scream for medics. The force is pinned down under intense fire. Beckwith realizes quickly that pressing this attack will result in the annihilation of his entire force. He orders withdrawal back to the camp. The rangers fight their way back to the wire under covering fire from the Montagnards inside the perimeter. It is a brutal lesson. The North Vietnamese are not going to be dislodged by small-scale counterattacks. This siege will only be broken by the relief column or by air power grinding down the attackers. The relief column finally arrives on October 25th, 6 days after the siege began. The 3rd Armoured Cavalry Task Force has fought its way through multiple ambushes and sustained heavy casualties, but they have made it. The column rolls up to Plei Me with armour and artillery and over 1,000 fresh troops. The North Vietnamese 32nd Regiment breaks contact and withdraws west toward Cambodia. The 33rd Regiment, which has been besieging the camp and taking horrific casualties from American airstrikes, also begins withdrawing. The siege is lifted. But the cost has been enormous. Inside Plei Me, the scene is apocalyptic. The camp has been pounded by mortars for 6 days straight. Bunkers are collapsed. Buildings are shredded. Unexploded ordnance litters the compound. The dead need burial. The wounded need evacuation. Many of the Montagnard families that lived outside the wire have fled or been killed. The survivors are traumatized. The Green Berets and their Vietnamese allies have held against overwhelming odds, but they are physically and mentally exhausted. They have stared death in the face for 6 straight days. They have fought night assaults in the darkness. They have called in airstrikes within meters of their own positions. They have watched friends die, and they have won. But the victory feels hollow when you look at the destruction. The casualty figures tell the story. The North Vietnamese 33rd Regiment suffers an estimated 600 killed during the siege and subsequent operations. 600 men dead out of a regiment of roughly 2,000. That is a 30% casualty rate. Devastating losses. The American airstrikes inflicted the majority of these casualties. When North Vietnamese soldiers massed for assault, the bombs came. When they dug in around the perimeter, the napalm came. The survivors will carry stories back to North Vietnam about the terrible power of American air support, about how the sky itself became weaponized against them. These lessons will influence North Vietnamese tactics for the rest of the war. They will learn to attack at night when air support is less effective. They will learn to hug American positions closely so bombs cannot be dropped without hitting friendly forces. They will adapt. But at Plei Me, American air power reigned supreme. The American and South Vietnamese casualties are lighter but still significant. The defenders inside Plei Me suffer killed and wounded. The relief column takes heavy losses during the ambushes. The helicopter pilots who flew resupply and insertion missions faced withering fire. But the camp held. That is what matters strategically. The North Vietnamese plan to capture Plei Me, destroy the relief force, and then assault Pleiku has failed completely. General Man's offensive has been blunted, but it is not over. The North Vietnamese regiments are withdrawing west toward their base areas in the Chu Pong Massif, and the American High Command is about to make a decision that will change the war. October the 26th, General William Westmoreland, commander of all American forces in Vietnam, flies to Plei Me. He surveys the damage, he talks with the defenders, he understands what has happened here. This was not a Viet Cong guerrilla raid. This was a major offensive by regular North Vietnamese army units operating in regimental strength with heavy weapons and sophisticated tactics. This is a new phase of the war, and Westmoreland sees an opportunity. The North Vietnamese regiments are withdrawing. They are hurt. They are disorganized. If American forces can pursue them aggressively, they can be destroyed before they reach sanctuary in Cambodia. Westmoreland authorizes the 1st Cavalry Division to take the offensive, find the enemy, fix them, destroy them. This is the mission the 1st Cav was designed for: airmobile operations, helicopters inserting infantry directly into the fight, artillery moving by helicopter to provide fire support, aerial rocket artillery striking from the sky. The North Vietnamese are about to face the full fury of American airmobile warfare. The 1st Cavalry launches Operation All the Way. The 1st Brigade under Brigadier General Richard T. Knowles begins pursuit operations on October 27th. Hundreds of helicopters lift infantry companies and fly them west and south of Plei Me, inserting them into landing zones to search for the retreating enemy. The North Vietnamese do not flee blindly. They fight rear-guard actions. They set ambushes. They contest every landing zone. Over the next 2 weeks, running gun battles erupt across the highlands as the 1st Cav hunts the North Vietnamese regiments. On November 1st, American forces discover a North Vietnamese field hospital hidden in the jungle. They kill 99 enemy soldiers and capture medical supplies and documents. The documents reveal critical intelligence, the locations of all 3 North Vietnamese regiments, the 32nd, the 33rd, and the 66th, which has now arrived from the north. All 3 regiments are concentrating near the Chu, Pong Massif, right where American commanders want them. November 14th, 1965. The 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry Regiment conducts an air assault into Landing Zone X-Ray at the base of the Chu Pong Massif. This is the opening move of the Battle of Ia Drang. 450 American soldiers from the 1st Cav versus 2,000 North Vietnamese soldiers from multiple regiments in prepared positions. What follows is 3 days of the most intense combat of the entire Vietnam War. Close quarters fighting in the elephant grass, bayonet charges, hand-to-hand combat, North Vietnamese human wave assaults smashing against American defensive perimeters, artillery fire missions called in danger close, napalm strikes within 50 meters of friendly positions. The fighting at Ia Drang will become legendary. We were soldiers. Once, and Young will memorialize the battle, but Ia Drang does not happen without Plei Me. The Siege of Plei Me is the opening act. It is the battle that brings the 1st Cavalry into the highlands. It is the fight that identifies where the North Vietnamese regiments are operating. It is the crucible that tests American air power and proves its devastating effectiveness. Plei Me sets the stage. Ia Drang is the main event, but we need to understand what Plei Me represents beyond just tactics and operations. This siege marks a fundamental shift in the Vietnam War. Up until October 1965, the war has been primarily a counterinsurgency fight against Viet Cong guerrillas. Local fighters, hit-and-run attacks, ambushes, booby traps, the kind of warfare that frustrates conventional armies. Plei Me changes that. This is regular North Vietnamese army units attacking in regimental strength with heavy weapons and coordinated tactics. This is conventional warfare in the jungle, and it forces the Americans to adapt their response. The arrival of the 1st Cavalry Division with its airmobile doctrine is a direct response to the threat of large-scale North Vietnamese operations in the highlands. The helicopters give American forces the mobility to find and fix the enemy. The firepower gives them the ability to destroy enemy forces even when outnumbered. Plei Me proves the concept. The siege shows that American air power can sustain an isolated garrison against overwhelming ground forces. It shows that reinforcements can be inserted by helicopter even into hot landing zones. It shows that pursuit operations can be conducted across vast areas using airmobile tactics. These lessons will shape American strategy for the next several years. The North Vietnamese learn lessons too. General Main's plan was sound tactically: besiege an outpost, ambush the relief force, overrun the objective. It worked in theory, but it failed in execution because the plan did not adequately account for American air power. The volume and accuracy of airstrikes around Plei Me shocked the North Vietnamese. They had faced American air attacks before, but nothing on this scale. The continuous bombardment, the night attacks with flare illumination, the precision of the strikes directed by special forces on the ground, the ability to resupply by air when ground routes were cut. All of this demonstrates capabilities the North Vietnamese had not fully appreciated. Going forward, they will modify their tactics accordingly. They will avoid massing troops where they can be struck from the air. They will attack at night and in bad weather when aircraft cannot operate. They will dig deeper bunkers and better camouflage. They will hug American positions closely in battle to prevent airstrikes. The North Vietnamese are learning, and the war is about to get much harder. For the defenders of Plei Me, the siege becomes a defining moment in their lives. The Green Berets, who held that camp for 6 days under constant attack, will carry the memory forever. Some will write about it, some will speak about it to later generations, some will never speak of it at all, the trauma too deep. The Montagnards who fought alongside the Americans earned deep respect from the Special Forces community. These indigenous fighters held their positions under horrific bombardment. They repelled assaults at point-blank range. They fought for their homes and families with courage that impressed even hardened Green Berets. Many of the Montagnard families who lived outside the wire lost everything. Their homes destroyed, their possessions scattered, some family members killed or wounded. The siege scars an entire community, but it also cements the bond between the Montagnards and the American Special Forces. That bond will endure through the rest of the war and beyond. Charlie Beckwith emerges from Plei Me with enhanced reputation as an aggressive leader who takes the fight to the enemy. His willingness to insert into a besieged camp by helicopter and then immediately launch a counterattack demonstrates the kind of offensive mindset that defines Special Forces operations. The fact that the counterattack failed does not diminish the courage required to attempt it. Beckwith learns from the experience. He understands the enemy capabilities better, he refines his tactics, and he continues building Project Delta into the premier reconnaissance unit in Vietnam. In early 1966, Beckwith will be critically wounded when a .50 caliber bullet rips through his abdomen. Medical personnel will initially triage him as beyond help, but Beckwith survives through sheer toughness. He recovers and eventually returns to the United States, where he spends years advocating for the creation of a Special Operations Counterterrorism Unit modelled on the British SES. In November 1977, his vision becomes reality. 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta is established. Delta Force, the unit that will become America's premier counter-terrorism force. And it all traces back to lessons Beckwith learned in places like Plei Me. The pilots who flew the resupply and close air support missions during the siege deserve recognition that often gets overlooked. These aviators flew into intense anti-aircraft fire day after day to keep the camp supplied and to strike the enemy. The Sky Raider pilots made attack runs at altitudes so low they could see individual North Vietnamese soldiers. The C-123 crews dropped supplies while tracers reached up toward their aircraft. The helicopter pilots who inserted Beckwith's force flew through a storm of ground fire to deliver troops into a hot landing zone. Many of these aircraft came back riddled with bullet holes. Some pilots and crew members were wounded. Some aircraft were shot down. But the missions continued because everyone understood that without air support, Plei Me would fall. The courage of these aviators kept the garrison alive. Their skill in delivering ordnance on target broke up enemy attacks. Their determination to complete resupply missions despite the danger provided the ammunition and supplies needed to continue the fight. Air power saved Plei Me, and the men who flew those missions deserve to be remembered as heroes. The siege also highlights the critical importance of Special Forces working with indigenous forces. The Green Berets at Plei Me were not fighting alone. They had 300 Montagnard irregulars and 14 South Vietnamese Special Forces alongside them. This combined force, properly led and supported, held against 2,000 North Vietnamese regulars for 6 days. The concept of training and advising local forces to fight their own battles is the core mission of Army Special Forces. Plei Me proves the concept works, but it also shows the limitations. Indigenous forces need air support, they need resupply, they need reinforcement when facing overwhelming odds. The lesson is clear. Special Forces can multiply their effectiveness through indigenous forces, but they still require the full support of conventional military capabilities when the fight escalates beyond guerrilla warfare into conventional battle. The political impact of Plei Me extends beyond Vietnam. The siege demonstrates to Washington and to the American public that the North Vietnamese are escalating the war. This is no longer just a counterinsurgency against local Viet Cong. This is major North Vietnamese units attacking American positions in regimental strength. The implications are stark. If the United States wants to prevent a communist takeover of South Vietnam, it will need to commit substantial ground forces to counter the North Vietnamese conventional threat. The 1st Cavalry Division is just the beginning. More divisions will follow, more troops, more equipment, more commitment. Plei Me is one of the early dominoes that leads inexorably toward the massive American buildup of 1966 and 1967. The siege shows that limited engagement will not work against an enemy willing to commit regular army units to the fight. When the siege finally ends on October 25th, the relief column enters Plei Me to find exhausted defenders and a camp that looks like it has been through an artillery barrage, which it has. The Montagnards emerge from bunkers, eyes hollow from lack of sleep. The Green Berets coordinate casualty evacuation and resupply. The wounded are medevaced by helicopter to hospitals in Pleiku and beyond. The dead are collected for burial. Ammunition and supplies are brought in to replenish what was expended during 6 days of combat. Engineers assess the damage to the defensive structures and begin planning repairs. Intelligence officers debrief the defenders and analyze captured enemy documents and equipment. The story of what happened at Plei Me starts spreading through the military command structure and eventually to the press. This was a major battle, a siege that tested American capabilities, and the fact that the camp held becomes a propaganda victory even as the cost is tallied. The aftermath of Plei Me reveals something important about the nature of the Vietnam War. The North Vietnamese achieved tactical success in one sense. They forced the Americans and South Vietnamese to commit major resources to defend and relieve the camp. They inflict casualties, they disrupt operations in the region, but they fail strategically. Plei Me does not fall. The relief column is not destroyed, and the 1st Cavalry Division pursues them relentlessly, inflicting heavy casualties during the withdrawal. This pattern will repeat throughout the war. The North Vietnamese and Viet Cong will win tactical victories, ambush convoys, overrun outposts, inflict casualties. But they will rarely achieve strategic objectives. They will not break the will of the American military to fight. They will not prevent the build-up of forces. They will not capture and hold major population centers. What they will do is wear down American, resolve over time. Plei Me is one battle in a long war of attrition, and attrition wars are decided not by battles but by will. The question that lingers after Plei Me is what the siege accomplished and what it cost. For the North Vietnamese, the siege was a failure. They committed 2 regiments, lost 600 men killed, failed to capture the camp, and were then pursued across the highlands, suffering additional casualties. The 33rd Regiment in particular was mauled. For the Americans and South Vietnamese, the siege was a victory. The camp held. The relief force arrived. The enemy was driven off. American air power proved decisive. But victories in Vietnam rarely feel like victories. The camp is destroyed. People are dead. Resources are expended. And everyone knows the North Vietnamese will be back. This is not World War II, where you capture territory and the enemy surrenders. This is a war where you hold ground at great cost and tomorrow you might have to fight for the same ground again. Plei Me is held. But at what long-term cost? That question will haunt American commanders for the next decade. The direct connection between Plei Me and Ia Drang cannot be overstated. The siege identifies where the North Vietnamese regiments are operating. The pursuit after the siege tracks them to the Chu Pong Massif. The intelligence gathered during late October and early November pinpoints their locations. When the 1st Battalion 7th Cavalry air assaults into Landing Zone X-Ray, on November 14th, they know they are landing in an area with heavy enemy presence. They are looking for a fight, and they find one. The 3 days of combat at Ia Drang from November 14th to November 17th become the most intense of the war to that point. American casualties are heavy, North Vietnamese casualties are catastrophic. But the battle proves that American forces can meet North Vietnamese regulars in sustained combat and win through superior firepower. Ia Drang validates the airmobile concept, it validates American tactics, and it begins a pattern of search and destroy operations that will define the American approach to the war for years. None of that happens without Plei Me setting the stage. So when we remember the Vietnam War, when we think about the battles that mattered, Plei Me deserves recognition. It is not as famous as Ia Drang. It does not have a Hollywood movie. But it was the opening battle, the siege, that brought American and North Vietnamese forces into direct large-scale contact for the first time. The fight that tested whether isolated Special Forces camps could survive against regimental strength attacks. The crucible that proved American air power could be decisive in the jungle. 6 days in October 1965, 10 American Green Berets and 300 Montagnard fighters surrounded by 2,000 North Vietnamese soldiers, pounded by mortars, assaulted from all sides, resupplied by air through anti-aircraft fire, reinforced by helicopter insertion into a hot landing zone, and ultimately relieved by a mechanized column that fought through multiple ambushes to arrive. This is Plei Me. This is where the real American war in Vietnam begins. Remember it. Remember the men who fought there. Remember what they faced and what they accomplished against overwhelming odds. Because understanding Plei Me is essential to understanding everything that follows in the Highlands. The siege is the prelude. But what a prelude it was.